The parable of the 10 virgins, Matthew 25, 1 to 13. Today we're going to look at the lesson that's well known among Christians as a whole, the parable of the 10 virgins. Here we see a picture of the 5 virgins that were wise. They had their lamps all trimmed up, trimmed up and ready to go, and they're on their way to see the bridegroom. And the other 5 are looking on in frustration. They don't have the lamps lit, and they're going to be in trouble because they're not going to be able to find the way to the bridegroom because their lamps have gone out. So this parable has a very, very good lesson for us, brethren, and it's applicable to today's message to us. When the Lord made this parable in His infinite wisdom, He knew that this lesson would apply to His end-time church. And for those of us that know that the Seventh-day Adventist church is the end-time church, we know that we have the testimony of Jesus and we keep the 10 Commandments, or we profess to keep them. And so this is very applicable to today, very important lesson, and we want to get into this today. So we have prayed. We ask that you do the same, claim the promise of John 16:13, and He shall be faithful and guide us into all truth. Let's begin. All right, so let's look at the goals for the study, and that is, let's find answers to the following 3 questions. Will this lesson have a real impact upon Seventh-day Adventists and Davidian Seventh-day Adventists? In other words, are we going to find that it's going to be very, very serious for us to know this lesson? Number 2, will there be an intervening time as it appears in the parable? If so, how? This is very important, brethren, particularly because advanced truth proclaimers, which are known as the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, teach differently in this intervening time. We've even heard some teachers say that after the sealing of the 144,000, there will be an intervening time of 42 months. Yes, you heard that right. We believe this is totally out of line and not true. So we want to get into what's the real meaning in this parable of the intervening time, the time where the foolish virgins find out that they've missed out in knowing that they should have had the extra oil, and the time to the closed door. So in other words, how long a time is this? Is there an intervening time right there? Number 3. What does inspiration say in regards to when this parable lesson will apply? Can we figure out what are the signposts that this is applying to us directly? The parable is a serious parable, and we need to know when this applies. All right, so let's look at the first information that we need to know, and that is the explanation of the meaning of virgins. And we can find that in 2 Shepherd's Rod, page 181. Observe that the 25th chapter is a continuation of the 24th. Mark the word then, meaning the time they fulfill the prophetic words contained in Matthew 24, 48 to 51. The virgins are a figure of the church. Number 10 has the symbolic meaning of universal, the church as a body. Note that they are all virgins. 144,000 are designated by the same word. See Revelation 14:4. The word virgin signified that the class represented by them, 10, are not those who are called out from Babylon, fallen churches, at the time the cry is made. 4. If they were to come out of Babylon by the call, come out of her, my people, Revelation 18:4, they would have been defiled with women, fallen churches, and therefore could not have been called virgins. Thus, the message of the midnight cry must find them in the house of God, virgins. All right, so why do we have 10? Well, it says the symbolic number 10 denotes universality, just as do the 10 toes of Daniel 2, the 10 toes of the other Bible beasts, and the 10 virgins of Matthew 25. You can find this reference 2TG, number 16, page 19. Why are they called virgins? Well, we have some answers here. Two classes of watchers in the parable of the 10 virgins represent the two classes who profess to be waiting for the Lord. They are called virgins because they profess a pure faith. That can be found in Councils. Let's see, that is COL, Christ Object Lessons, page 406. Okay, and then why the extra oil? Well, we see that the wise are those who take extra oil, extra truth that lightens the rest of their way. 2TG number 14, page 15. Tragically, those who now fail to fill their vessels, Matthew 25, 1-4, with this extra oil, the additional truth that of the judgment of the living, flowing from the golden bowl, Zechariah 4, will finally see that their lamps flicker out forever like a gutted candle. White House Recruiter, page 37. Let's look at that bottom statement there. That is filled with a lot of information, brethren. We see that Matthew 25, 1-4, it means that the oil is symbolic of additional truth. And what is that truth? The judgment of the living. We'll go more into this as we go, but that's very key to knowing. And of course, that flows from the golden bowl, which is the lesson that the prophet gave us in Zechariah 4. A very powerful lesson that teaches us how we are to know truth, how we are to gather it together as a people. And of course, the sad ending is that they will find out they missed eternity. All right, more on the importance of this extra oil. So the message tells us some really good news here. It plainly appears that the church membership is divided into two classes, the wise and the foolish. The wise take no chances. They continually search for oil, truth, and they fill their vessels with it at the first opportunity. Now let's stop there for a second. This is very indicative that the wise have a honest heart for searching truth. They're not satisfied. You see this? We are not satisfied in knowing just what we know. We're always searching for more truth, more light to help our pathway. Now, does that mean that we're going to accept every Tom, Dick, and Harry that puts out a report? No. It means that to the law and to the testimony, if somebody brings something for us that can be backed up to the law and the testimony, of course, we're all ears. We want to hear it. And we know that the Lord did, in fact, fulfill his promise in Elijah, that he would, in Malachi 4:5, he would send Elijah. And that message is what really fills our lamps today. The foolish, though, see no need for any more than what is in their lamps. They are satisfied with what they already have. The oil, a substance which lightens ahead one's path, obviously is figurative of prophetic truth. Truth that lightens the heart by unveiling the future. Concretely speaking, the lamp filled with oil denotes the individual's reservoir of truth in action. Truth that meets his needs only for the time then present. The extra oil in the vessels, therefore, represent additional truth. Truth that takes up where the old truth leaves off. In other words, the oil in the lamps and the oil in the vessels represent two revealed truths at two different times, one following the other. For example, while the judgment of the dead is truth in action, the judgment of the living is truth to go into action as soon as the judgment for the dead is over. Very powerful, brethren. We'll learn more about this as we go. Obviously, oil that has been consumed, as is the oil in the virgin's lamps, represent past truth, truth that has accomplished its purpose. But oil in the vessels represents truth ready to be activated and made to shine immediately after the oil in the lamps is consumed. Since the 10 virgins represent the church membership during the judgment for the dead, the oil in the lamps manifestly represent the truth of the judgment of the dead. The extra oil that is in the vessels must, therefore, represent the truth of the judgment of the living. The additional truth, early writings, page 277. Plainly then, the lamps gone empty represent the judgment for the dead passing away, and the oil in the vessels represents the truth of the judgment for the living going into action. Very, very powerful, brethren, and we learn a lot about this extra oil in this reference. 1TG, number 21, page 5-6. And feel free to pause the video anytime during this study lesson if we've gone too fast in our reading and you need to catch the paragraph at your schedule. Why are they all sleeping? The fact that the congregation too has failed to discern the devil sowing his seed among them twice over vindicates the indictment. Sleeping preachers preaching to a sleeping people. Testimonies, Volume 2, page 337. And proves that the entire church, both the ministry and the laity, is sound asleep, in fulfillment of the words of Christ. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, and 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. But while the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. Matthew 25, 1-5. The evil of allowing devil freely to sow the tares among the wheat has existed in the Christian church since the passing of the apostles, with the result that whenever the Lord has sent a message to his people, the tares among them have straightway, at the instruction of the leaders, raised their hands and voted out whoever would listen to the messenger and obey the message, thus time and again selling their birthright for less than a mess of pottage. The professed people of God have lost out, and still the church has never learned the tragic lesson. Track 3, page 60-61. Oh, brethren, so solemn. We have never learned our lesson. Every time a message has come to God's people, it has been rejected by the very leaders that it is sent to. Isn't this something? So, consequently, the laymen, those that are not leading out, are the ones that have always heard the message and tries to raise their hands in professing this message and have been voted out and punished and thrown out. All right, so in Christ's object lessons we read more. As Christ sat upon the party that waited for the bridegroom, he told his disciples the story of the 10 virgins, by their experience illustrating the experience of the church that shall live just before his second coming. Now we highlighted that because we're going to clarify that. The 2 classes of watchers represent the 2 classes who profess to be waiting for the Lord. They are called virgins because they profess a pure faith. By the lamps is represented the Word of God. And that can be found in Christ's Object Lessons, page 406. All right, so we read here that it illustrates an experience of the church that shall live just before his second coming. Now, one of the things that we are learning in this message is that it's not necessarily very, very quickly right before his second coming. The words just before his second coming must be taken in context. And for instance, we can read in Hebrews 9:24-26, for Christ has not entered into the holy place made with hands, which are figures of the true, but in heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor yet that he should offer himself as the high priest enters into the holy place every year with the blood of others. For then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now, once, in the end of the world, hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. So again, this is very important to remember that God's message must be taken in context with the full understanding of the thought behind it. In other words, Paul is saying now, once, in the end of the world. Well, we know back then, in Paul's time, it wasn't the end of the world. So in the same token, when we read that the experience of the church that shall live just before his second coming, we have to understand that it's not exactly, a week or 2 or even a few months before his second coming. This takes place for things to play out, many things to happen before his second coming. In Matthew 25, how does this apply to the SDA church? In Matthew 25, he calls the purified church the kingdom of God, and the people he likens unto virgins, and the cleansing he illustrates by a door which lets in the wise but keeps out the foolish. 2TG number 42, page 31. Here we see something very alarming, brethren. The prophet likens our lesson, Matthew 25, the virgins, to the fact that that door represents the cleansing of the church. In other words, Ezekiel 9 is that time when the door will apply. And what is this cleansing? Well, we know from Manuscript Releases, Volume 1, page 260. Study the 9th chapter of Ezekiel. These words will be literally fulfilled. Yet the time is passing and the people are asleep. They refuse to humble their souls and be converted. Not a great while longer will the Lord bear with the people who have such great important truths revealed to them. By the way, let's stop right here. Lest there be any confusion, the prophetess is not talking to the world. She's talking to who? A people that have had great important truths revealed to them. Seventh-day Adventist. But who refuse to bring these truths into their individual experience. The time is short. God is calling. Will you hear? Will you receive his message? Will you be converted before it's too late? Soon, very soon, every case will be decided for eternity. And here we have a pictorial representation of the marking angel going through the Seventh-day Adventist church and placing the seal upon those that will survive the Ezekiel 9 church judgment. Very, very serious and solemn. All right, panic and shock sets in. Their lamps are out. Here we read in 2TG number 11, page 11 and 12. And the foolish said unto the wise, Give us of your oil, for our lamps are gone out. Here is truth that should not be lightly passed by any. The oil can but represent revealed prophetic truth, truth that lightens the path ahead. Oil in the vessel, before being put into the lamp, however, cannot lighten the path of anyone. Hence, the oil in the vessels of the five virgins must represent extra supply, extra truth, that came to them during the period of slumber and sleep. For when the call was made, behold, the bridegroom cometh, all 10 found the oil in their lamps consumed. The vessels of the wise, however, were full, and so they could refill their lamps. In contrast, the foolish found that not only were their lamps out, but their vessels were empty too. They then went to obtain the oil, but it did them no good, for they found the door closed to them. They had been satisfied with what they had in their lamps, presuming there was no need for more. Contrary to the assumption, though, during the period of slumber and sleep, they suddenly saw their lamps go out. Finding themselves in spiritual darkness and confusion, they were anxious to get oil. Here is seen that the message which the church has during the period of slumber and sleep is not sufficient to carry her members through to the end. They need an extra message. Very clear, brethren, very, very powerful. This explains why we need that extra oil in the vessels, and if we don't, we will be in panic and shock. Here we see a picture of the pleading of the foolish virgins as the wise virgins are about to enter on their way, and they're pleading and crying out, give us this oil, because they now realize they're going to need it to get to the kingdom. It's too late. Very, very solemn lesson. Tragic reality sets in. The door is closed. When the cry is made, behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. All 10 virgins see that the light of their lamps is going out. They see that the message of the judgment of the dead is passing. Quickly then, the 5 wise virgins refill their lamps with extra oil, which they have stored in their vessels, to go on to meet the bridegroom. But the 5 foolish virgins, those who thought there was no need for extra oil, no need for extra message, the message of the judgment of the living, find themselves in gross darkness. Yes, they find themselves without the light which the message of the judgment of the living unfolds. Upon discovering their foolish neglect, they rush to obtain the oil. Light on the subject, but in the meantime the door has been shut. Probationary time for the virgins, the church, has closed. When they call for admission, they are politely told by the Lord himself, I know you not. Very solemn, brethren. Let us not be these people. Let us be searching and accepting of his message of the hour. When does this lesson apply, and what is the intervening time? So these are a couple of the original questions we asked. Well, here we have the answer. We learned in 2TG number 42, page 31, that the closing of the door is the church cleansing, known as Ezekiel 9 Church Judgment. Manuscript Releases, Volume 1, page 260. The message tells us that the judgment shall last approximately 7.5 days. We can find that in Revelation 8:1. This is the silence in heaven while the Lord does his strange act, as talked about in Isaiah. Some will not be slain right away, but rather in the last couple days. This obviously will make aware to those who made the tragic mistake of ignoring and even fighting the Lord's last message to his SDA church, the message of his rod, Micah 6:9, also known as a judgment for the living message. So we see right now, brethren, and it's so sad, some have made videos, some have been high-profile leaders in our FGA church saying, stay away from the shepherd's rod. Don't you dare go there. It's false. It's leading you into wrong paths. Stay with Ellen White in the Bible. Don't mention anything about this false message. How dare you bring this to the church? These people are fighting the Lord's message, brethren. They're fighting it. Sadly, this is who the parable will apply to. They will see, oh my, what have I done? This is what it's talking about, brethren. For more information, please see our video, God's Final Message to the SDA Church. This describes more in detail what this final message is and how it is currently rejected among many of our leaders today. All right, so for more information on this extra oil, please pause this video and write down the following sites. They have some good information for you and some reports and, of course, the actual writings of the Elijah prophet sent to us, Brother Victor T. Hodoff. If you're not aware of what he wrote, don't take my word for it. Take up your own studies. See if these things are so. We're told that Bereans listened to the message, thought it was good, but they went back and verified it. They wanted to see for themselves. So anybody, including yours truly, that tells you these things, that's not what you're going to rely on. You're going to rely on your own research. You're going to go in there and see for yourself. Open these different reports. Look at the actual words from Brother Victor T. Hodoff. Read them. See if they are to the law and to the testimony. But don't lean on flesh, whatever you do, brethren. You cannot lean on flesh for your safety. Okay? So thank you so much for listening. We know that this message is very important for us today, and we wanted to bring that because the time is at hand with this COVID problems, these lockdowns, all these things happening around the world. It can only point that the Lord is about to release his people. He's going to release his battle axe, 144,000, and his final army, and go and set up the loud cry and reach the honest of heart with the final gospel message to all the world. Thanks again, brother, and until then, may the God continue to guide you into all truth.